Hey everyone, I'm Amy Connell. Thanks for tuning in to Lessons to My Teenage Self, a Christ-centered, diet culture-free show about all things health for teen girls. This is the shortcut you need to thrive in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. As a personal trainer and nutrition coach, I'm passionate about empowering you to find your best version of health. Each week, we dig into one topic that I wish I'd known as a teen. And sometimes we dig into topics that my guests wish they had known. I am so excited that Grace Tran has joined us today to talk about letting go of imperfection. And all the people said amen. I mean, we all need that. So let me tell you some about Grace. You guys, she does it all. Grace's passion is to empower people to live the full and faith-fueled lives they were made to live. She loves sharing real-life lessons from her personal experiences around topics such as emotional and spiritual health, authentic faith and works, and navigating relationships through God's lens. Formerly, Grace has served as a marketing manager at Google, Tech Workspace Fellowship Leader. She's a multi-site church marketing director and a pastoral ghostwriter. She also co-hosts the Let's Unpack That with Alex and Grace podcast and runs a Christian life coaching business with her husband. She is also a member of the Maverick City Gospel Choir. To learn more, visit withthetrans.com or connect with her on Instagram, and I will put that information in the show notes, but it's basically at with the trans, Trans, or at Gracelence. Did I say that right?
Yes, grace and excellence.
I love that. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Amy. I honestly wish I had this podcast when I was a teenager. So yeah, all the things like nutrition and health, holistic health, spiritual health, I did not have much guidance in that when I was a teenager. So I'm really hoping to whatever wisdom God decides to share through us today would really bless people.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And I just think podcasts are like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
They are.
We can learn so much, and there are so many people to glean wisdom from. And I'm so grateful for them and for the technology. And I don't know everything for sure. I do know a little bit about health, and I know a lot about having a bad relationship with health in my body and food and all of that. And so I'm just trying to plant seeds so other girls don't have to experience that.
Yes, so good. I can relate.
I know you wanted to come on today and talk to us about letting go of imperfection. Oftentimes, the things that we are passionate about sharing with others come from our story. So I was wondering if you would mind sharing some of your upbringing and your passion about helping people to let go of imperfection.
Yes, well, it's a long story. I'll just give a precursor. If anyone wants to learn more about this, I share a lot about it on social media and on our podcast. So feel free to go to the links that Amy will provide. I grew up in the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, where it's very fast paced, very hustle culture mentality. Everybody is, fighting to get into the Ivy Leagues, into the biggest tech companies. And so it's very achievement focused. And especially for me, being a first generation Asian American, my parents were immigrants. And if anyone else, has parents who may have immigrated or may have just had a very difficult upbringing themselves, it's very common for the parents to kind of pass down this like achievement based mentality of like, you need to work hard, you need to give everything to your work because that's how you're going to get stability and success and achievement and happiness. And especially because my parents were not believers. My mom came to Christ after she immigrated, but my dad, he's still to this day, he's on his journey, but we never went to church. We never really talked about faith. So for me, I was very much a nominal Christian. I was just grinding at my schoolwork, struggling, constantly feeling like, why am I so behind? Take me like 10 times the work and the effort and the time to get the same results as my classmates. Back then, I had no idea I actually had ADHD as well. So yeah, I had like all of these different learning styles, learning just systems that were set up not conducive to how I learned the best and how I could really thrive. In addition to the pressure that I felt from my parents of like, you need to pursue this career, you need to be an engineer, you need to get into the top schools. And it's interesting because they actually didn't, I can't remember many times when they explicitly said that, but it was very much implied in their own anxiety, in their own, they'll be talking about about their friends' kids getting into Stanford and Harvard and their friends' kids becoming engineers and directors and managers. And as an only child, I kind of just internalized that so much pressure on myself because I was like, I'm my parents' only hope at having a golden child of success and to be able to brag to their friends about. I kind of internalized a lot of that pressure. And so I just wanted to share, if any other ladies listening, like you can also feel that pressure that you put on yourself. Like your parents or people around you may not even be telling you, you need to work so hard, you need to sacrifice your sleep to do well, but you just feel this like inner tug, like I have to do it. I would definitely invite you to lean into that, not like go for it, but really question and ask God, like, God, where is this coming from? What is underneath this that is causing me to feel this way? Because for the longest time, just like I told you, Amy, I didn't have a podcast like this. So I was just stuck in that mindset of like, I don't know why I'm this way, but I don't think there's a way out. And so for the longest time, I was just overperforming, trying to be perfect, trying to be a perfectionist, wearing it as a badge, you know, being like, oh, my weakness, quote unquote, is perfectionism. But really, if I was honest with myself, I was proud of it because everybody would praise me for it. You know, my family members, my teachers, they would all say, you're doing so well, like you're going above and beyond, you're very detail oriented. And those things are not bad. But what is dangerous is when we're always compulsively, we feel like we need to do that. Otherwise, we're not happy with ourselves and we can't take a break. We can't fully enjoy our lives. And so that was me. Pretty much all of my school, like not elementary, but more like middle school, high school, I just constantly pulled late nights, some all-nighters. And I remember being so tired in all my classes. And then I would go home right after school and just crash because I was so exhausted. And I would just repeat that cycle every single day. So thankfully, God's brought me to the other side of it now, but that's kind of my backstory.
Wow. You know, it's interesting. So one of the things that I do that drives my children crazy is I often will hear something and I tie it to kind of our health. And when you were talking about what your parents were saying about other people's children, one of the things that I have learned is with regard to body image, and particularly girls and their body image, that the most impactful thing that moms can do is say positive things about themselves, about other people. Because when we start saying negative things about our bodies or other people's bodies, that really hits our daughters, even if we're saying like, you're wonderful, you're amazing, you're beautiful. And so it's funny to hear that part of your story, because I'm sitting here thinking you were receiving the praise from your parents about and thinking that's what I have to do. And that's how that is success.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I love that you tied it back to, you know, as parents, how they modeled their own kind of biblical self-love, not in the world's way, but like in terms of celebrating their own strengths and celebrating their own wins and blessings. You know, I think, again, going back to the immigrant mentality, I think a lot of that generation and that cultural background is focused on what we lack. And so it's more like a scarcity mindset of like, we need more. We can't be content because that's going to lead to us not working hard. And so I think that definitely translated looking back when I was growing up, just being like, well, my parents don't seem to be very happy with how they're doing. And so how am I supposed to do that? It was never modeled for me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to imagine, I mean, obviously I don't know because I didn't live it, but the mentality of like, well, if I don't work so hard all the time, what's it worth? What was it? What was my sacrifice for? Any immigrant has sacrificed something significant to come. And I have to imagine the mentality and the culture of that is, well, we better do our very best or it's not going to.
Yeah, that can apply to anyone of any cultures, really. If that constant rat race, that hamster wheel that you're just constantly spinning, thinking, okay, someday it'll be enough. But that's really a myth. That's an illusion that we build in our heads, thinking it's going to be enough someday if we just keep working hard, keep hustling. And I would say, especially when I was in high school, I can see that play out very much so in like, okay, the milestone to success is getting into college, right? And so you get to college and then you're like, somehow I still don't feel relief. Like somehow this pressure is still there because the next milestone is, getting good grades and then graduating and passing your classes and getting an internship, there's so many other milestones, one after the other, your entire life. I think it comes back down to looking at, your life holistically and not measuring your success by one single outcome that you need to control, that you want to define yourself and your worth, which I think is really something that not many of us are taught how to do until we get to a breaking point of like, what am I doing all this for? And that's happened to me several times where God humbly brought me to a place, especially after going through like pulling all those late nights and grinding so hard and just being so stressed all the time. I had some health issues that started coming up, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, I'm still pretty young. Like I should not be having issues like this. And so it was kind of a gentle, but also scary, like wake up call to realize, oh, I really need to focus on like sustainable health holistically, and to be able to work from a place of overflow and rest. And that includes one of the keys to do that and to be able to not strive all the time is to know like you are truly enough, and how to show yourself that compassion, that grace, which comes with letting go of perfection.
That's so good. There's so many threads there I want to follow, but also we don't have a lot of time. But I also just hear you saying, like we constantly are trying to fill that God-shaped hole in our heart. And it's never enough unless we fill it with God.
Yes.
Because it's definitely easy to just grind harder. So I'm curious, you sound like you are at more peace now, and that maybe you have let go of some of that perfection. I'm wondering when you realized that you were being too hard on yourself, and what did you do then?
That's a great question. I think it happened not on purpose. Basically, a couple years, I think 6 years ago, I kind of just accidentally stumbled across coaching and counseling, like Christian-based coaching and counseling. I was living in Australia at the time with work. I was new there. I didn't know anyone. I met this really awesome Christian faith-filled lady who turned out to be a life coach. I went to some of her events and I was like, she seems like she's really got herself together. She was a lot older than me, and she's lived life. She had a lot of more experience than me. And I noticed like she was doing a lot like in her business, in her ministry, but she seemed like really like her cup was full. And in the meantime, I was like looking at my own life and I was like, I'm young and I'm supposed to have more energy, but I feel exhausted all the time. I'm working at this tech job and I can barely handle that one job. Like it's just too much, let alone trying to make community and friendships and keep in touch with family, working with her. And she was the first amongst other coaches and counselors and mentors that kind of I started to open up my heart to let them in and to see the messiness in my life. Because again, I think a lot of perfectionists, or if you don't realize you're a perfectionist, maybe you'll relate to this, just feeling of shame of your messiness. There's this desire to hide the messiness and the complexities and the struggles. And that's basically what I did for most of my life. Was I didn't want to burden other people with my struggles, and I also didn't want to admit that I was struggling, because I was like, well, people have it harder than me. I'm doing my best, and I just didn't really know how to acknowledge my true emotions and like the true state of my challenges. So it was when I started working with these awesome life coaches and counselors, and they started to all point out the exact same thing. They kept saying, Grace, it sounds like you're being pretty hard on yourself. Like why do you set those standards for yourself? And they didn't say it in a condemning way, but they just started to invite me to consider, why do you strive so impossibly high? And for me, that was interesting, because for me, I didn't think it was impossibly high. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do, is to be able to do everything and do my work really well and cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and that was me in all of high school and in middle school too. Every time I got assigned readings, I would feel so bad about myself if I couldn't read the entire thing. That's why I would stay up so late and try to read everything thoroughly, but then somehow not know how to retain it because of my learning styles and not knowing how to study smart. I was studying hard, but not studying smart. And so that kind of started to open the door. And I think I remember also one conversation I had with a spiritual mentor and a ministry leader. We were just catching up on life, and the topic of perfectionism came up again. And I told her, yeah, like, I guess my thorn is I'm a perfectionist, but I don't know. I don't see it as that bad. And then I guess she started to ask me like, oh, why don't you see it as like a bad thing? And I was like, why would she ask me that question? So I'm thankful, for loving women in my life who've really challenged me in that way, who've asked me really hard questions to help me look inside myself. And that's what started the floodgates of realizing, oh, the yoke that I'm carrying, this weight, this burden that I'm carrying, God actually never asked me to carry in the first place. I'm just self-imposing it on myself when I'm not a superhuman. I'm not, like a fictional character. I'm a human being with God-given limits for a reason, because he wants me to trust him. He wants me to rest, and he wants me to be able to prioritize and say no to things so that I have margin in my life and I can focus on the things that matter. So yeah, I think for a lot of my life growing up, I had no idea about that. My parents, my whole family, never talked about it. I didn't see boundaries, implemented. So that was a new concept for me as well. When I started learning about boundaries, I was like, are you sure this is okay? Like I felt really uncomfortable with it at first.
Say no, I'm sure.
To practice saying no. I didn't want to let people down, because I was taught it's really important to make people happy and to bring joy to others. And again, that's not a bad thing, but you really have to do that from a place of being aware of your own needs and how your cup is doing.
That's so true. One of the things that I wrote down while you were sharing your story is it sounds like it really started when you decided to trust these women and be vulnerable with them. And it's so hard to do, right? You want to really make sure that you're in a safe space and trust someone, but also look at the freedom you have found because you decided to just open up. And then when they started asking you questions, they really encouraged you to be curious about it and to be compassionate with yourself. And these are all things that are so hard to do for ourselves, but at the same time, how healing they can be.
Yes. Yeah. Because if we don't have that vulnerability in that safe space, it's really hard for us to be honest with ourselves and also with others and with God, because we're always on guard, right? We have more spaces in the world where we feel like we need to be a version of ourselves versus like having a safe, vulnerable space to really be honest. And from that place of honesty, see all the different layers that need to be untangled and healed and brought to the Lord. And I think that's through that process. I mean, it's a lifelong process really, but I think once you start embarking on that, you start realizing, oh wow, there's so much more to God and his love than I had known. Because at that point, before working with these women who helped me, I was a Christian. I followed God. I knew about his love in my head, but there were so many false beliefs about God and about myself that were blocking me from really receiving his love and really living from a place of knowing I am enough. I'm adopted. I'm a child of God. I don't need to strive and get approval from people to feel enough. You were saying we all have a God-shaped hole in our hearts. I totally agree. But so many of us try to force ourselves to be like, God, just come in right now. Like, I want it to happen, when actually there's this tangle of unhealthy false beliefs that are hindering us from really receiving God to fill that hole. And so I would encourage anyone who feels that way, who you're like, I know all the Bible verses, I go to church, I know about God, but I still feel like I'm striving. I still feel tired and stressed. It very likely probably has to do with some false beliefs that the enemy has tried to influence you with and wants you to doubt yourself and wants you to not know who God is and your identity so that you're just trapped, So I would encourage you to lean into that.
Yeah, that's great wisdom. Thank you for that. Grace, you have a podcast. So if people are listening, then they are podcast listeners. I would love for you to tell us just a little bit about your show, Let's Unpack That with Alex and Grace. And then I know you also have a free Christian women's work-life balance 10-day devotional. So tell us about that as well.
Yes. So me and my husband, Alex, we host a weekly faith-based podcast called Let's Unpack That. And we talk all about like how to live your life full of faith and full of freedom, full of joy, the way that God designed you to. And it really has to go back to God's original design for us in our relationships, in our work, in everything, in our health as well. So yeah, if you're interested, there's like so much more to unpack. Obviously, you can check us out at that podcast. My husband and I also have a really crazy story of how we met. For any single ladies who are praying for your future husband or marriage, oh my gosh, God is real, because my husband and I met in the most unexpected circumstances when we were halfway across the world. As for the resource, yes, I would encourage anyone who relates with this sense of like overwhelm and perfectionism and not knowing how to balance all of the different things in your life. We have a free devotional. It's a 10-day devotional that's not just about reflection, but also action as well. It helps you reflect on what action steps to apply in your life to kind of grow more in this area. So you can get that at withthetrans.com/balance. And although it says work-life balance, it really applies to anyone, even if you're not working in a job or not, because these principles, it starts with knowing how do you relate with any sort of work, whether it's at school or internship or job, or even just what you do for other people to help them. So yeah, I would just encourage people to download that. It's totally free, and we just hope it helps you and blesses you.
Congratulations on both of those. Okay,
Thank
Grace,
you.
tell us a meaningful Bible verse that you would like to share with everybody.
Yes. Well, this was a hard question, but I think one of my top favorite ones that I always hold on to is Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And I think that would be tied to, I know you have another question of asking, what would I tell my past self, my teenage self? I would say that verse encompasses everything in your life where you feel like there's a struggle or you're unsure about, indecisions for the future. I know I felt a lot of weight about picking the right college, picking the right major and job and relationship, like all these decisions. And in every decision, God just kept reminding me, it's about your heart. What you do comes out of your heart, and it's not about doing the quote unquote right thing. It's really about where's your heart? Like, how is your heart postured towards God? Is it of faith and obedience and submission and surrender to Him? Or is it out of fear and control and anxiety and wanting things to be a certain way? Otherwise, you're not going to be happy with it, So that's my biggest, encouragement and just lesson, I think, is just focusing on your heart, because that's what truly matters, and everything that happens in your life will truly flow out of that place.
That's so true. Awesome. Grace, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is all for today. Take today's lesson and go out there and live the life God has for you and your amazing original body. Thanks for tuning in today. Do you have a question you would like answered here on the Lessons to My Teenage Self podcast? If so, go to the show notes where you will see an anonymous form you can fill out, and that question may be answered here on the show. Also, if this show is valuable to you, could you do one of two things that are enormously valuable to me? Number one, share it with a friend. Just take a screenshot, send it to her, or you can go to the show and send it straight from there. Also, if you can provide a rating and review, particularly if you listen to your podcast in Apple Podcasts. Thanks again, and see you next time.